In 1936, a coal miner's widow named Hattie Combs lived in a three-room cabin at the head of Blackberry Holler in Harlan County, Kentucky. Her husband had been killed in a roof fall at the No. 4 mine the year before. The company paid her $312 in settlement money. She had 7 children under the age of 14. She had no pension. She had no bank account. She had a garden, a hog, 2 laying hens, and a leather-bound family Bible with 31 years of household notes written in the margins. On that $312, plus what the Holler could grow, trade, and stretch, Hattie kept all 7 children fed, clothed, and in school. When she died in 1972, her granddaughter found the Bible in a cedar chest. The margins were the inheritance. Most of what was written there had never crossed the mountain. They lived by a different arithmetic up in the Hollers. Not poverty arithmetic, Holler arithmetic. A set of rules carved by Scots-Irish ancestors, refined through 3 depressions, and enforced by mountains that did not care what year it was. The Holler economy ran on barter, kin, and a refusal to owe any man outside the family a single dollar. We watched it work for 200 years and called it backward. We replaced it with payday loans and called it modern. Most of it died with the grandmothers. Number 23 cost a mountain family nothing and saved an estimated $94 a year in 1940 dollars, more than 3 months of a miner's wages. Number 16 was so foreign to Flatlanders that a 1957 Saturday Evening Post reporter called it incomprehensible, and Harvard sociologists are now studying it as a model of community resilience. And number 3, the rule no Holler family ever spoke aloud to an outsider, the one that kept mountain households solvent through coal strikes that broke entire counties, has been forgotten almost everywhere. These 25 secrets were not about being poor. They were about being free of any man who held a ledger. They were the difference between a Holler family that survived the 1933 strike and one that signed up at the company store and never climbed out. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten poor man money secrets Appalachian mountain families swore by that nobody outside the Hollers ever learned. Number 25, the 3-generation cabin. A Holler cabin was never built for one family. It was built for 3. Grandparents in the back room, parents in the middle, children in the loft. A single hearth heated all of it. A coal miner in McDowell County in 1938 housed 11 people on a wage that would not have covered a 4-room rental in town. The arrangement cut household costs by an estimated 60%. The grandmother watched the babies. The grandfather mended harness and fixed boots. Nobody was idle. Nobody was warehoused. The cabin was not crowded. The cabin was a labor pool with a roof. Number 24, the Springhouse refrigerator. Every Holler cabin sat near a cold spring. You built a small stone house over it. The water ran through a trough at 54 degrees year-round. Milk, butter, eggs, and crocks of beans stayed cold for free. A mountain family in 1942 saved roughly $38 a year by not needing an icebox or the weekly ice delivery that town families paid for. The spring did not break down. The spring did not need a repairman. It had been refrigerating that family's food since 1847. The spring was not a luxury. The spring was an appliance the mountain had installed before anyone arrived. Number 23. The Wild Greens calendar. A Holler woman knew exactly which week each wild green came up. Ramps in early April, creasy greens by mid-month, poke shoots in May, dandelion through the summer, and sochan along the creek banks. A family in Letcher County in 1940 ate foraged greens 4 nights a week for 8 months of the year. Replacement cost at the town grocery was an estimated $94 across a season. That was 3 months of mining wages. The greens grew themselves. The knowledge of where and when was the actual inheritance. The calendar was not written down. The calendar was wired into a woman who had walked the same ridge with her mother in 1908. Every November, when the first hard frost came down the mountain, a family killed its single hog. The whole holler came. One family's hog became the labor exchange for the next family's hog the following Saturday. By Thanksgiving, every cabin had bacon, sausage, lard, hams in the smokehouse, and cracklings for cornbread. The cost of meat for the year was the price of one shoat in March, roughly $4. Equivalent store-bought meat across the year would cost more than $80. The hog was not a meal. The hog was an annual investment that paid 1,900%. The day was not a chore. The day was a meat company the Holler owned outright. Number 21. The quilt made from nothing. Mountain women pieced quilts from worn-out shirts, flour sacks, and feed bags. A finished quilt weighed 5 pounds, covered a bed for 20 years, and cost almost nothing but thread. A woman in Wise County, Virginia, in 1939, made 4 quilts each winter while sitting by the fire. Replacement cost at a department store was roughly $7 each, or $28 for the set. Across her quilting life, she made an estimated $580 in untaxed household goods. The flour companies eventually printed their sacks in flowered patterns because they knew the women were watching. Pillsbury did not invent that idea. The Holler women had trained it into them. The quilt was not warmth. The quilt was a small textile mill running by the fire after supper. Number 20. The bartered doctor. A Holler doctor in 1935 was paid in chickens, cured hams, jars of honey, and the occasional silver dollar. A house call that would have cost a town family $3 in cash cost a mountain family 2 laying hens and a quart of sourwood honey. Dr. Burchett of Pike County kept a written ledger from 1928 to 1956. Almost 70% of his entries were in barter. He never went hungry. His patients never went into debt. It was not charity. It was a medical economy running on hens and honey instead of cash. Number 19. The coal bucket inheritance. A miner's wife saved every lump of unburnt coal from the fire each morning. The fragments went into a separate bucket. By winter's end, the bucket held enough to heat the cabin for an extra 2 weeks. Across a 30-year marriage, the saved coal was worth roughly $140. A neighbor in Mingo County asked Hattie Combs why she fussed with the cinders. Hattie told her the cinder bucket had paid for her oldest son's school shoes for 7 straight years. The cinder was not waste. The cinder was a school year hidden in the ash pan. Number 18. The sang patch. Wild ginseng, sang in mountain speech, grew on north-facing slopes in old-growth woods. A Holler man knew his patches the way another man knew his bank. You dug only the mature roots. You planted the berries back. You never told anyone where the patch was, not even your brother-in-law. A pound of dried sang in 1940 sold to the Hong Kong buyers in Asheville for $7, almost 2 weeks of a miner's wage. A careful patch produced 2 to 3 pounds a year for a lifetime. The sang patch compounded itself. The patch was not a hobby. The patch was a bank that nobody else could find. Here is what the Flatlanders never understood about the Holler economy. The mountains ran on 3 currencies. Cash was the smallest one. The other 2 were barter and kin obligation. A Holler family that mastered both could survive a year without earning a single dollar. A bushel of corn in 1938 traded for a half day of plowing. A plowing traded for a sack of seed potatoes. The seed potatoes traded for a quart of moonshine. The moonshine traded for a doctor's visit. Not one penny of cash changed hands across the whole chain, and a sick child got medicine at the end of it. Town economists studying the region in the 1930s reported Appalachian poverty rates that looked catastrophic on paper. They were measuring the wrong currency. The cash poverty was real. The wealth was real too. It just was not denominated in dollars. The Hollers had built a system the federal income statistics could not see and could not tax. That was not an accident. That was the entire point. Number 17, the patched overall rule. A pair of denim overalls cost $1.25 new in 1938. A patched pair cost nothing. Mountain wives patched overalls with squares cut from older overalls until the original cloth was barely visible. A miner in Floyd County wore the same pair for 9 years before the suspender buttons gave out. The patching saved roughly $32, enough to buy a milk cow. He bought the cow. The cow paid for itself in 2 years, and paid for itself again every year after. The patch was not poverty. The patch was a milk cow, growing one stitch at a time. Number 16, the burying money. Almost every Holler family kept its cash savings buried in a mason jar somewhere on the property, under a flat rock by the spring, behind a loose board in the smokehouse, 3 steps north of the apple tree. The 1929 bank crash had taught the mountains a permanent lesson. By 1957, when a Saturday Evening Post reporter asked a Letcher County farmer where he kept his money, the farmer answered, "Somewhere a banker cannot get to it." The reporter called the answer incomprehensible. The farmer was holding $1,400 in a jar buried under his corn crib. He died with every dollar of it intact. The jar was not paranoia. The jar was a refusal that had read the newspaper in 1933 and remembered. Number 15, the cousin network. When a Holler family ran short, they did not borrow from a bank. They borrowed from a third cousin 2 ridges over. The loan was interest-free. Repayment came in labor, in produce, or by returning the favor when the cousin needed it. In Knott County in 1941, one family calculated that the cousin network moved $180 worth of goods and services through their household that year, all without a single written record. The kin ledger was kept in memory. It was more accurate than any bank book. The cousin was not family. The cousin was a credit union built out of blood. Number 14, the Sunday shoes. Mountain children went barefoot from April to October. Shoes were saved for school, church, and winter. A Holler mother in 1943 reported that her 7 children wore through 1 pair of shoes per child per year, instead of the 3 pairs town children went through. Annual savings were roughly $14 across the family. Hattie Combs sent her boys to school in October with feet so leathered they could walk on a frosted yard for 30 seconds without flinching. She had trained their feet to do the work the shoes would have done. The shoes lasted because of it. The bare foot was not a sign of poverty. The bare foot was a shoe budget defending itself through August. Number 13, the sorghum stand. Every Holler had a sorghum mill, a horse-drawn press that squeezed cane into syrup boiled down in long pans. A family planted a 1/4 acre of cane in spring and pressed it into 30 gallons of molasses by October. Sugar at the company store cost 7 cents a pound. Equivalent sweetness in homemade sorghum cost 1 cent a pound. Annual savings for a family that used a gallon of sweetener a month, roughly $11. The sorghum also sweetened the medicine, preserved the fruit, and traded at the Crossroads store for goods the family could not grow. The sorghum was not a treat. The sorghum was a small refinery that closed the loop between the cane patch and the kitchen. Number 12. The mended tool. A broken hoe was never thrown away. A miner welded the head back on with a forge built from a truck brake drum. A snapped axe handle was replaced by hickory cut from the back of the property. A man in Buchanan County in 1939 had not bought a new tool in 11 years. Every implement in his shed had been repaired at least twice. The total tool replacement cost avoided was an estimated $46, enough to buy his wife the treadle sewing machine she had been wanting since 1934. The tool was not broken. The tool was waiting for a winter night and a hickory sapling. Number 11. The smokehouse loan. When a neighbor's hog died early, or a fire took a family's stores, the holler did not let them go hungry. Each cabin in the surrounding ridges sent a ham, a side of bacon, or a crock of lard. The contributions were never called gifts. They were called loans. The receiving family understood that when fortune turned, they would send food in the opposite direction. A 1944 settlement school worker in Breathitt County recorded 23 such loans across a single winter on a single creek, valued at roughly $67 in pork and lard. Not one was ever defaulted. The loan was not food. The loan was insurance with no premium and no paperwork. Number 10. The LYE soap kettle. Once a year, mountain women boiled wood ash and saved cooking fat together in an iron kettle in the yard. The result was 8 to 10 gallons of lye soap that lasted the family 12 months. Cost was zero. Replacement cost at the store was roughly $9 a year in $1940. The soap was harsh on the hands, but it cleaned everything: clothes, floors, children, even the dog. A woman in Magoffin County said her grandmother's soap recipe had not changed since 1839. It did not need to. The wood ash had not changed. The fat had not changed. The hands had not changed. The kettle was not a project. The kettle was a year of soap simmering down to nothing. Number 9. The funeral fund quilt. Every Holler family kept one quilt back. It was the burying quilt. When a death came, the church took up a small collection, and the burying quilt was sold to the family that could afford it. The proceeds, typically $8 to $12, bought the coffin lumber and the dug grave. A family in Wise County in 1938 buried 3 relatives across a decade without going into debt for a single funeral. The quilt rotated. The system worked. No undertaker ever set foot in the Holler. The quilt was not a textile. The quilt was a small mutual insurance company stitched together in winter. In 1965, President Johnson came to Inez, Kentucky, sat on the porch of a coal miner named Tom Fletcher, and declared a war on poverty. 40 years later, researchers at the University of Kentucky studied the long-term outcomes of the mountain counties that received the most federal aid versus the ones that received the least. The aid had not failed. It had also not succeeded the way the planners expected. The counties that retained the most traditional Holler practices, barter networks, kin obligation, and home production showed the strongest household financial stability into the 2000s. The ones that abandoned the old systems for full cash dependency showed the worst. The grandmothers would have said it in one sentence: the cash never replaced what the cash was supposed to replace. It just made the older system look outdated long enough for it to die. Number 8. The root cellar. Dug into the hillside behind every cabin, it kept potatoes, apples, cabbages, turnips, and onions through the winter at a steady 38 degrees. A family of 9 in 1941 stored 600 pounds of food in a cellar the husband had dug with a single shovel over 2 autumns. The replacement cost of equivalent winter produce at the company store was roughly $42. The cellar paid for itself in one season and then paid for itself every season for the next 60 years. The cellar did not run on electricity. The cellar ran on dirt. The cellar was not storage. The cellar was a grocery store the family had built into the side of a mountain. Number 7. The Mountain Wedding. A Holler wedding in 1939 cost the bride's family almost nothing. The church was free. The dress was sewn from a cotton bolt traded at the crossroads. The reception was held in the yard with food brought by every household on the creek. The cake was made by an aunt. The fiddler played for a jar of moonshine. A wedding for 50 people cost the host family an estimated $3. The same wedding catered in town would have cost $40. The expense was not in the dollars. The expense was in the years of relationship that had earned the contributions. The wedding was not cheap. The wedding was a community calling in 3 decades of favors. Number 6. The Cash Sale Garden. Every Holler family planted one cash crop beyond what they ate. Beans, tomatoes, or sweet corn could be sold at the railroad stop or hauled to a town market on a Saturday. A family in Wyoming County, West Virginia, in 1940, cleared $58 from a 1/4 acre of half-runner beans, almost 2 months of mining wages earned by the wife and children while the husband worked underground. The garden was the wife's salary. It bought the school books, the medicine, and the Christmas oranges. The bean row was not produce. The bean row was an income the company never deducted from. Number 5. The Repaired Radio. By 1948, almost every Holler cabin had a single radio. When it broke, you did not buy another one. You took it down the road to a man who could fix it for 50 cents. A new radio cost $24. The repair extended the radio's life by an average of 7 years. Across a Holler of 40 families, the repair economy moved roughly $900 a year in avoided purchases. The repairman was paid in cash, eggs, or moonshine, depending on the season. He kept a shop in his front room. He never advertised. The radio was not broken. The radio was a 50-cent transaction that prevented a $24 mistake. Number 4. The refusal of the company store. The coal company offered credit at its store at prices roughly 30% above the town grocery. Most miners took the credit because it was easy. The disciplined Holler families refused. They walked the extra 4 miles to the town store on Saturday and paid in cash. A family in Harlan County in 1939 saved an estimated $112 a year by refusing the company credit, almost 4 months of wages. The song says you owe your soul to the company store. The Holler families who never owed it understood something the song wrote down in code. The store was not a store. The store was a cage with shelves. It was not pride. It was a 4-mile walk every Saturday for 30 years that bought a family its freedom. Number 3. The money never spoken of. No Holler family ever discussed money in front of an outsider. Not the amount in the burying jar, not the price of the sang, not the value of the smokehouse. The rule was older than the United States. A grandmother in Leslie County in 1942 explained it to her granddaughter with one sentence: "What they do not know, they cannot ask for." The rule held through the New Deal, through the war on poverty, through every federal program that came to the mountains and asked questions. The Hollers answered politely. They answered partly. They never answered fully. A woman in Knott County died in 1989 with $9,200 in jars buried across 3 locations. Her own children did not know about 2 of the 3. It was not secrecy. It was a fortress built out of silence. Number 2, the Bible margins. The household ledger was kept on the blank pages and margins of the family Bible. It recorded births, deaths, debts owed, debts paid, the price of a hog in 1922, the year the well was dug, and the cost of the coffin in 1935. The Bible was the safe deposit box. It traveled with the family from cabin to cabin. It survived fires that took everything else, because someone always grabbed it first. Hattie Combs's Bible held 31 years of household arithmetic in 3 different handwritings: her grandmother's, her mother's, her own. When her granddaughter inherited it in 1972, the margins were worth more than the cabin. The Bible was not scripture. The Bible was a mountain family's complete financial history bound in leather. Number 1, use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. That is the whole code. 11 words, no spring house, no sang patch, no quilt by the fire. None of the 24 secrets above mean anything without this one beneath them. Hattie Combs's settlement check for $312 stretched 7 years because every object in her cabin was made to outlive the year it was needed in. The cinder bucket, the mended overalls, the patched quilt, the repaired hoe, the lye soap kettle. Each one was the same sentence applied again. No bank required them. No app explained them. 11 words ran the Holler economy for 200 years. It is the most boring rule in any language. It is also the rule the mountain grandmothers used to outlast every depression, every strike, and every collapse the rest of the country wrote books about. None of these secrets required a paycheck. None of them required a town address or a school diploma. They required a holler. They required kin. They required a woman willing to keep the margins of a Bible and a man willing to dig a cellar with 1 shovel across 2 autumns. The Appalachian families of the 1930s and the 1940s were not poor in the way the magazines told the country they were. They were cash poor on purpose. They had watched the cash economy break in 1929 and decided the system that broke was the system not worth trusting. So they kept the older one running, quietly, underneath, in the spring houses and the smoke houses and the buried jars and the unmarked sang patches up on the north-facing slopes. The Flatlanders saw scarcity. The Hollers saw sovereignty. We called them isolated. We called them stubborn. They were neither. They were running an economy the rest of America could not see, could not measure, and could not break. The cabins are mostly empty now. The springs still run. The sang still grows on the north slopes for anyone who knows where to look. And the 11-word rule that built every one of those households is still waiting in the margin of an old Bible, in a cedar chest, in a holler that has not forgotten its own name.